Yo, man, this your boy Westside, man. Look, I'm trying to educate y'all on some things. 10 things about Andrew Young, man. Former mayor of Atlanta. Check this out, man.
In the civil rights movement, working with Martin Luther King Jr. in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Entering politics, Young was elected to Congress, served as the first African American ambassador, and later became the mayor of Atlanta. In 1981, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. In this original Black Excellence video, we will honor Andrew Young, Atlanta mayor, United Nations ambassador, and civil rights leader. So without further ado, let's get started. On March 12, 1932, Andrew Jackson Young Jr. was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, the product of a middle-class family. His father was a dentist, his mother a teacher. He had to travel from his neighborhood to attend segregated schools. After graduating early from Howard University, Young chose to study at Connecticut's Hartford Theological Seminary. In 1955, he became an ordained minister. Working as a pastor in Georgia, Young became active in the civil rights movement, organizing voter registration drives in 1954 in the face of death threats. He moved to New York City to work with the National Council of Churches in 1957, then returned to Georgia in 1961 to help lead the citizenship schools that tutored African Americans in literacy, organizing, and leadership skills. Though the schools were a success, Young sometimes had trouble connecting with the rural students in the program. After a few years with the National Council of Churches in New York, he returned to Georgia in 1961. As the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was running the citizenship school program, Young became a member of the organization and began working closely with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He coordinated desegregation efforts throughout the South, including the May 3, 1963 March Against Segregation, during which participants were attacked by police dogs. Dr. King valued Young's work, trusting Young to oversee the SCLC when he tried to spend time behind bars. In 1964, Young became the SCLC's executive director. While in this position, he helped draw up the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Young and Dr. King were very close friends and soldiers in the fight for civil rights. Young was also with Dr. King on the day of his assassination in Memphis, Tennessee, on April 4, 1968. Following King's death, Young became executive vice president of the SCLC. In 1970, Young left the SCLC to make a run for Congress, but was defeated at the polls. 2 years later, he ran again, and this time, Young was elected to the House of Representatives. Young was the first African American to represent Georgia in Congress since Reconstruction. In his time as a legislator, he supported programs for the poor, educational initiatives, and human rights. He sponsored legislation that established a U.S. Institute for Peace, the African Development Bank, and the Chattahoochee River National Park, while negotiating federal funds for the MARTA, Metro Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority, the Atlanta Highway System, and a new international airport for Atlanta. During Jimmy Carter's run for the presidency, Young offered key political support. In 1977, then-President Carter appointed Young to serve as the nation's first African American ambassador to the United Nations. Young left his seat in Congress to take the position. While ambassador, he advocated for human rights on a global scale, such as sanctions to oppose rule by apartheid in South Africa. Young was an architect of the first U.S.-Africa policy grounded in human rights rather than simply Cold War calculus, and he helped negotiate an end to white minority rule in Namibia and Zimbabwe. But Young's greatest accomplishment was his contributions to Atlanta, Georgia. He was instrumental in the building of the modern-day city. He was elected mayor in 1981 and re-elected in 1985 with nearly 85% of the vote. Hartsfield International Airport, whose development he championed, made it possible for Atlanta to attract 1,100 new businesses, $70 billion in foreign direct investment, and 1 million new jobs to the region during his tenure. It is now the busiest airport in the world. While mayor, The city hosted the Democratic National Convention in 1988. Young also led the successful effort to bring the 1996 Olympic Games to Atlanta. Young's involvement with Africa continued in the years since his term as ambassador. President Bill Clinton appointed him founding chair of the Southern African Enterprise Development Fund. And in 1996, he co-founded Good Works International, where for more than 15 years, he promoted an approach to sustainable economic development in Africa and the Caribbean grounded in profitability and social responsibility. Through the Andrew J. Young Foundation and its partnerships with international agencies and the private sector, he continues to focus on expanding educational opportunity as well as innovative approaches to alleviating hunger and poverty in the U.S. and abroad. While he was at Hartford Theological Seminary in Hartford, Connecticut, Young met his future wife, Jean Childs, a teacher, in 1952. After a brief courtship, the couple married in 1954. They had 4 children, but his wife would lose her battle to liver cancer in 1994. 2 years later, Young remarried Carolyn McLean, an elementary school teacher. Young wrote about his role in the fight for civil rights in 3 books: A Way Out of No Way, An Easy Burden, and Walk in My Shoes. As an esteemed civil rights activist, Young has received multiple accolades that include the Presidential Medal of Freedom and the NAACP's Spingarn Medal. Morehouse College named the Andrew Young Center for Global Leadership in his honor, and Young has taught at Georgia State University's Andrew Young School of Policy Studies.
We appreciate the fact that you stayed with us until the end. Thank you for spending time with us, and don't